Ice Babies, welcome or welcome back. Thank you for joining me today. What do I have for you? Well, if you're a supporter of this channel, you know that my intentions with content are to inform respectfully and get your wheels turning. And I'm here on a Zoom call with my friend Jeremy, who I think has led or is leading a very interesting life with a condition called cerebral palsy. Jeremy, this whole interview idea kicked off from a conversation you and I were recently having. And because you're so open and honest about your disability, I saw an opportunity to support and educate others through your experience. So thank you, Jeremy, for being my guest today. And I have a couple questions to kind of like prompt us throughout this. Just give me the word.
You bet. Let's let her rip.
Okay. If you feel comfortable introducing yourself and whatever you want to say, a little bit about yourself.
Sure. How do I normally describe myself? Like when I go and out to restaurants and social events, the first thing people say is, well, what do you do for a living? Right. And I usually tell folks that I work in HR here in Dallas, a big company. And then all my friends always say, well, Jeremy, why don't you go tell them you're an attorney? I'm like, yeah, most folks don't like attorneys, or you never know how they're going to react. So I just stick with the HR professional and leave it at that. But I'm going to be 51 here soon, and born and raised with cerebral palsy. But I've done, led a normal life. Got married, got divorced, went to college, got degrees, did everything you were supposed to do as a regular person, and big into sports and things like that, and just doing the normal things, hanging out with friends. And honestly, I do a lot of just hanging out by myself. I'm a very introverted person, generally speaking, and like to keep to myself as well. So that's pretty much me in a nutshell.
That's funny. I feel like I wouldn't call you introverted, maybe an intro extrovert or however they mash those two up. So so you were born with cerebral palsy.
Yeah, yeah. My parents didn't really realize that I had it until I was about 2 or 3 years old, because I was a late walker. Now, of course, all of this information from way back when is all based on what I've been told by my parents.
Right.
Because I think my earliest memory is probably when I was 6 or 7, watching a baseball game with my mom. But everything prior to that, I have, based on what I was told. But born with cerebral palsy. I was a late walker, so my parents took me to the podiatrist, and I was then obviously diagnosed with that, and obviously was living with it long before then, and
Right.
didn't even really know it until they told my parents that there was my parents knew there was something wrong, and took me to the doctor, and then it was diagnosed. And obviously I've been living with it for as long as I can remember.
And essentially, cerebral palsy is an injury to the brain, right? I researched a little pre Zoom call, and I understand that it usually develops during pregnancy, birth, or shortly after. So for you, and you and I spoke about this last night. For you, it was a birth defect.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure how it happened or why it happened, but I've had a lot of years to think about it, and it was probably something related to a deprivation of oxygen during birth. I think I was told that the doctors had to go in and get me from my mother. So, and that probably had something to do with it as well. And from what I've been told by friends and family, cerebral palsy is really a deprivation of oxygen, at least in my case, during birth. I honestly don't know. I never really cared too much about what it was or how it was or how it came to be. I was always more focused on myself, or like, how do I deal with what I'm doing? It really is. I've left it up to my friends who said, hey, Jeremy, do you know you have like cerebral palsy, and what kind do you have? And I'd be like, yeah, I don't have a clue. All I can tell you is what it does to me. And that's, so it's interesting. My friends are always very interested in it. They don't really talk about it a lot, but sooner or later it comes up in conversation, and somebody gives me more details about it than I would even know. At least it shows me that my friends care enough to do some research.
Yeah, it's because we love you. So what was it like growing up with cerebral palsy? I mean, I understand it's all you've ever known, but I feel like there's also no denying that you've had to approach life a little differently.
Sure. I mean, from a medical perspective, I was told that I came out cross-eyed from birth, and I had surgeries on my eyes when I was an infant, and then I had heel cord extensions or Achilles tendon extensions, depending upon what you call it. I had both of them done when I was about 3 years old, and then I went back in when I was like 12 or 13 and had the right one redone. So as far as a medical condition goes, that's what I've had done from a medical perspective. But really, what's more important to me was the social aspect of it. I've always been trying to navigate that, because I always, when I was a kid, I had braces on my legs, kind of like Forrest Gump.
Right.
You seen that part of the movie? Those braces back in the 70s when I was born, that was normal. So I had those. I had a walker when I was like in kindergarten and first grade with a little wicker basket, you know. So, but I've always been able to deal with that sort of stuff. But I've always been different. I mean, it was no denying that I was different. I had the the braces and the things that most kids wouldn't have. I had things that made me different. You couldn't escape it. And I've always sort of been dealing with that ever since.
But
Just
you,
everything to me is different, right? And is most of my friends would tell me, Jeremy, we don't think about that. And I'm like, well, that's why we're friends, because you don't think about that. And trust me, I go to airports, or I go to restaurants, or I walk on the street. Um, I get looks from all sorts of people. It just happens. I remember when I was in high school, I had a job like everybody else, and I worked at a retail store as a cashier for years. And the one story I always remember is, you know, parents would come up with their kids, and the kids would, 4 and 5 years old, and they'd walk up to me, "Hey, mister, why do you walk so funny?" And their parents would freak out. And I'd be like, no, it's all right. They're curious. They want to know. So if you come at me with a reasonable question, whether you're 4 years old or 40, I'll tell you, which is partly the reason why I'm here. Whereas if you come at me in what I would consider a derogatory manner, which doesn't happen very often, because those people don't approach you. They just stare at you from across the room. um, and if it's derogatory in some form or fashion, I won't bother with you. I generally, it's my condition. If I want to make fun of it, which I do all the time, I can. But nobody else can, unless I know you, and then we joke about it, and I don't even think twice about it. What good example? My nickname in high school was Speed Bump. It's what's on the back of my senior jersey.
I don't
And
even get
okay, all right.
it.
So picture picture me, because my high school was multi-story, whatever. So uh I'd always have to use the railing on the side to get up the stairs. So speed bump, and the fact of trying to envision me going up the stairs and everybody having to go around me. So that's,
It
yeah,
sounds
it's,
awful, but it was a term of endearment.
yes, it definitely was. Yeah, like I said, my friends can say that, my classmates can say that, but if I heard it from somebody else, I'd be like, yeah, that's rude.
Right. Right. That reminds me, and I'm glad this is why I thought you were the perfect guest and the perfect person to kind of talk about some of these, I don't know, deeper topics like disabilities and I'm so grateful, but you're so human, you're so honest, and if you haven't figured out, guys, Jeremy is a hoot. The story that you were talking about being in high school reminded me of, I don't know where we were coming from or headed to. We have a friends group, Jeremy and I, and we get together whenever we can and go out, whether it's dinner or karaoke, and have some cocktails. And I just remember this, well, up until recently, and maybe we'll get into that, you've walked with a cane, something that assisted you to help you with your balance. And at times, if needed, we would expect you to kind of like hold on to us. But I recall this one time I was like, I guess walking ahead with some people and you're behind me, and then I just hear like, ah, turn around and you're like in the bushes, like, hey, can you help me?
Somebody come back and get me. Yeah, sometimes the older I got, the idea of curbs and getting up and down off a curb, which was what is it, 3 inches tall? Yeah, I can't do that because I don't have a railing to hold on to. Or if I had to, I could do it myself, but I'd have to get down on all fours and kind of crawl my way off and I even did that recently, getting the mail from my apartment. I'd have to, the mail room is outside and you have to got to walk down walk the sidewalk to get there and then to get back in the car. The little old lady who runs the cleaner there, she's, hey, do you need some help? Because they know me. They don't know me by name, but hey, we'll help you. I'm like, no, I'm good. I mean, I'm like, whatever. I'm like, but I've become better at accepting help the older I get. Because yeah, I could do it myself, but why bother if somebody's willing to help me? I I'm not too proud to take the help. Whereas when I was a kid, leave me alone. I can do it. And quite honestly, when I was younger, I really could. I didn't, the braces and the walker and sort of stuff, that sort of stuff sort of went by the wayside, in elementary school. And I was as normal as I could be, all the way through, from, later in elementary school, all the way through college and law school. So I just, up until recently, I've kind of reverted back to needing the cane and the walker and all that stuff, and that's a whole different story. But never too proud to ask for help. So yeah, there's lots of funny stories. You can talk to my friends. Everybody has a story about where Jeremy fell in the bushes, or or Jeremy fell down and I had to deadlift him, or something, right? And it's I mean, everybody has, and I don't know, it's weird because I don't really fall down that much, but apparently when it happens, everybody remembers it. And everybody has one of those stories. And apparently me falling in the bushes is yours.
Well, first of all, just I'm immature and falling is funny, but you're just so like blasé about it, like, hey, help, let's get the show on the road. It's not like no one freaks out and it's like, oh my gosh, Jeremy. It's like, oh, okay, let's.
No, no, no. There are people who freak out.
Is that right?
Yeah, I remember one time I went with my work. I mean, I've been working where I am now for 25 years, and this is probably 20 years ago. We went bowling for a Christmas party, right? And back then, 20 years ago, I mean, I bowled in high school. I mean, my team, we had two in St. Louis where I grew up. Bowling was a big deal, and my high school had two teams, and we went to state 3 years in a row, and it was a big deal. Well, it was a big deal for us. Nobody else seemed to care because bowling is not football, right? But it was the one sport I could do. And I'd been bowling since I was like 6 or 7 in rec leagues and whatnot. And so I wanted a letter jacket in high school. So that was what I did. I got a letter jacket 3 years in a row. And and that was cool. But back to the story, I remember I went to this work Christmas party and took my bowling ball. It's probably about 15 pounds, regulation bowling ball. But I stand still and you usually see people walk up to the foul line.
Yeah.
I that's too difficult. I just stand at the foul line and throw the ball. With a ball that's 15 pounds, it's regular physics. If you throw this way, your body's going to go the opposite way. So I fell down, like I always do, which for me is normal, because when you, like I said, you're at a standstill, the energy's got to go somewhere. So I fell down, and everybody at work, except for a few folks who had seen me bowl before, totally freaked out. Oh my God, he fell down. Somebody go get him. And I'm like, no, I'm good. See, my wrists aren't broken. Everything's fine. And I got it. And they realize, oh, that's just normal. But no, if you're not accustomed to being around me or seeing me do certain things, yeah, it can freak a lot of people out. Sure, absolutely.
I'm sure you've learned how to fall to reduce the impact by now.
Well, knock on wood, I've never broken a bone.
That
I've
is
never.
interesting.
Yeah, I'm surprised. I'm surprised too. Now, I'm hoping that trend continues. But yeah, when I was a kid, I used to fall all the time. Um, where most people walk heel toe, when you just walk, I walk like this on my toes. So I would run through a pair of tennis shoes in 6 months because the toe would wear out, or I would trip and fall because because if you're not walking normally heel toe like this, you're walking like this, you tend to fall forward. So I learned how to fall, and I've never, and I got pretty good at it. But now as you get older, you try to learn, at least I did, try to learn how to not put yourself in certain situations where you don't have to fall. So that's a lot of what I've tried to do is not. I don't want to run a marathon. All right. I don't need to run a mile a minute. I just need to get from point A to point B. And as long as I do that at my speed,
Right.
everything works out the way it's supposed to.
That's good. Yeah. Mitigate the risk. And
Absolutely.
those are things you have to think about. When you were talking about like high school and elementary, you went to just a normal local at the time public school. It wasn't a special school, or it didn't accommodate certain handicap people. You were just thrown in with you were in Gen Pop, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah. If you want, yeah, absolutely. But that you got to remember how old I am. I was born in '73, so
You
in
look
the.
so young. You look really, really young. I don't know what
Thank you.
I wonder. I won't even go there, but yeah, I know you've heard it before.
Well, I tell people this on a different topic. They say, "You look so young." I said, "Yeah, that's why I can date girls 20 years younger than me."
Oh,
So,
Jeremy.
oh, regular school. Yeah, it was a big deal. Back in the '70s, that's not what you would have done. Um, I was in a regular school, regular elementary school, regular high school. Everything was normal. All my friends were normal. I was the one. I was the one outlier. Maybe I had one other person in the neighborhood who also had a disability of one form or fashion. I generally didn't associate with them. I didn't want to,
Hmm.
but I was in normal school. Now in St. Louis, where I grew up, they had this thing called the special school district, which is where they put all the people with disabilities. And now for folks who need it, that's a good thing, right? They get their physical therapy, they have learning disabilities along with their physical disabilities. So there's a reason for them to be in the special school district. And for in St. Louis, it was a big deal for the folks who needed it. But I will say this. I learned a long time ago, or my mother passed away a few years ago, and my father told me, or reminded me, because me and my mother, I love her to death, right? But like any teenager, we'd always argue and bicker. But my father reminded me, he said, you know what, if it wasn't for your mother, you'd have been stuck in special school district, because that is where the teachers wanted you to be, because they didn't want to deal with somebody with a disability. They've got 30, 35 other kids to deal with, and they looked at me as a problem
Sure.
that they had to solve. And the best way to solve it is to ship him off to somewhere else. And my mother every year, from when I was in elementary school all the way through high school. She fought to keep me in regular school. She would say, Jeremy doesn't belong in special school. He doesn't need special school. If he needs physical therapy, which I took physical therapy and occupational therapy up through junior high until I got tired of it. My mother would drive me to, take me out of school, drive me to the special school district 20 minutes away, and then drive me back to school. It was her and only her that that kept me where I was. And quite honestly, if she hadn't done that, who knows where I'd be?
Yeah.
Uh, because I can only speak for myself, and this is only a guess. Kids in special school don't go to major universities, and they sure as heck don't go to law school,
Right.
right? So that allowed me to be as normal as I could be. And even when I got older in high school and physical therapy was still necessary, my parents, my father included, worked to get me the physical therapist to come to my high school. So while everybody was in gym class, I was on the in the auditorium, stretching my muscles with the therapist. Totally weird, being that, but my parents did that. It wasn't something that wasn't normal. They almost required it of the special school district people and my high school to work together to make sure that I got what I needed without having to be separated.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So, it reminds me of a time where people, I have a lot of my friends who, we're all working, paycheck to paycheck, right? A lot of us are. And a lot of my friends and people I know, they're like, Jeremy, you're so spoiled. Look at where you've been. Look what you've done. You have a good job. You have the money you need. You have all the stuff you could possibly want. And I said, no, I'm not. Yeah, sure. If you want to look at it that way, sure, I'm spoiled. I have, but I don't see it as spoiled because number one, I know where my money comes from or where it came from when I was a kid. My parents did well for themselves. And if it wasn't for them and I was born into a different family, I'd be a totally different person.
Of course.
So I don't look at myself as being spoiled because spoiled implies that you're just oblivious to your
Right.
surroundings
And
and you just
ungrateful.
take ungrateful, then you take it for granted. I look at myself as being lucky, right?
Yeah.
I'm lucky in the fact that I'm a kid with cerebral palsy, that I was born into the right family who had the gumption to stick it out and get me the surgeries I needed and get me this whatever special assistance I needed. They made sure to get it for me. And if it wasn't for them, my dad and my mother, I wouldn't be here. I have thought and I don't talk about this a lot, but you know, back in the 70s, early, who knows? Kids like me, if you look back at history, because I was a history major in college, kids like me ended up in asylums,
Hmm.
right? And now, granted, we're way past that.
Yeah.
Well, at least but if it wasn't for my parents and who they were and who they are, I could be one of those kids,
No, it's
or
true.
or worse, I wouldn't be here at all, right?
It's true
So
when you think about the time frame and the way that the public's thinking has shifted so much. As you said earlier, we've definitely come a long way.
sure. So, I look at myself as being a lucky person, which is a weird thing to say because people say, well, how can you consider yourself lucky? Well, don't get me wrong. And you said it earlier, Meg. You're always so open and honest and pretty much in a good mood. That's pretty much because that's what I let you see. All of the stuff that you would expect to have a kid or a person who has all of these things going wrong with him. Yeah, I go through all those things. I just don't show people. I do that sort of stuff at home. I try not to focus on it when I'm out and about. But yeah, have I done those things? Have I gone to the dark side and thought about those things? Yeah, a lot. Maybe not so much now, but when I was a kid, it happened all the time where I would, have I ever thought about suicide? Absolutely. Like, I don't want to be here. I learned but I would say, before I get into that story, but I've never done it, right? I've never made a plan. I've never, I've never tried to buy a gun, right? I've always thought about it up here. I've never taken it from mindfulness to action. So in that respect, I knew enough to go, you know what? Well, as much as I don't want to be here and do what I have to do, I'm not going to go that final step and, forget about it. So, and I think that's important to say because it's not as rosy as I make it out to be every day.
Right. It's a
Um,
testament. I don't want to interrupt you, but it's really impactful what you're saying, because it's a testament to, choosing your reality and kind of shifting your perspective. You do have to focus more on the positive and what you've got going for you. And, you feel very lucky. It could have gone a completely different way. And how do you represent that the way that you feel about that is you stick it out, and you
sure.
choose to have, a more positive attitude, because no one is going to blame you for an off day, an off week, for, I don't know, throwing your phone or yelling or having a meltdown. But
Yeah.
you've really honed in your emotions, and you've always been just such a delight to be around.
Well, thank you. I'm like, well, I remember in school, um, in elementary school, we had a health class or something, and it came up in a topic, right? Because I'm the one kid and the one kid in class with a disability. So whenever you're talking about anything remotely close to that, people always come to me and say, well, what about you? And I'm like, well, I learned through one of those classes in school, 1 in 600 kids has cerebral palsy. And I've always thought, well, darn it,
Right.
why am I that one kid? Oh, I don't want to be that one kid. I want to be like everybody else. I've
He's
always wanted to
special.
be. Yeah, if that's the kind of special, you can have it. And I'm not a big fan, but I can't really do anything about it. But I do remember. I always remember that statistic, 1 in 600.
Hmm.
I don't know if that's changed in the last 30 years or whatnot, but that's what I remember. I remember other times in elementary school where there was a kid in my class. He had diabetes, right? And as a kid, that's a big deal. And it was. We don't talk about medical conditions like we do today, but he had planned to do a talk at school about his diabetes, and then at the end of it, my teacher, trying to be inclusive, I think.
Ah,
And so, Jeremy, at the end of you, would you like to talk about what you have? And I was like, no,
yeah.
no, I don't want to. No, I sure as heck don't want to be put on the spot.
Yeah.
Right. If you want to ask me about it and talk about it like what we're doing today, you and I have been talking about this for a month,
Yeah.
and that's different. But you can't put me on the spot. And I'm like, nope, don't want to talk about me. I want to be like everybody else.
Yeah.
And she even made, I think she was nervous. I think she wanted to be inclusive. And in the process of that, she put her foot in her mouth and she goes, well, you and your Jerry's kids. And I remember that because Jerry Lewis back in the day had muscular dystrophy telethons, and you can look it up, right? Because we don't do telethons
Right.
anymore. And I remember telling her, I said, no, 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 my spokesperson is not Jerry Lewis. That's muscular dystrophy.
Wow.
I have cerebral palsy. That's different. And our spokesperson is Tony Danza. Uh, you know,
You're
back
right. That
back
is
in the
foot in mouth. If
yeah,
if I've ever heard.
yeah. So, and it's funny what you remember, but yeah, back in the 80s, Who's the Boss was a big deal, and Tony Danza was a big star back then. And I mean, why would I remember that story? No idea. Like, do I remember who that teacher was? No clue, right? She was not my favorite, but I do remember some teachers. But no, I remember that story. I came back to it and I said, if my classmates wanted to know about it. So about a month later, I went back and did something similar to what you and I are doing today, talking about whatever, ask me questions, go ahead. But it was because on my time, based on what I wanted to do, not because my teacher wanted to be inclusive, which isn't really the right word because we didn't use that word back then.
Right.
But that's looking back at it, that's what I think she was trying to do. She just failed.
Right. No, that's fair. You want to Yeah, and you have to have time to assess the situation and the intentions. Thankfully, you know me, and you know that I'm by no means trying to make you some poster child for CP. It really is coming from a place of, if first of all, it really surprised me, and I'm going to use the term admirable again. You're so independent, and we haven't even uh gone over this, but I mean, you live independently, you drive, you have a great job, you're successful. So I think you being able to assess the situation here, what we're doing, and understand that it is coming from a place of simply wanting to help and support, and maybe have people identify with what you're going through. Guys, this is as good a time as any to remind you to subscribe, join the community, the reminder bell, ding ding, smash it. Get the conversation flowing in the comments. We'll engage. Your support is everything. And if you're enjoying this video, show your gratitude with the simple act of subscribing for more content. If you're moved to support this channel monetarily, that option is available for you. This is just a baby YouTube channel, and who knows if it will grow, but it's up to you. So I'd like to get into this, Jeremy, as it's something that's happening to you in real time. As of late, you've begun to experience some new symptoms, and I think you said you've received a new diagnosis. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, well, to put it succinctly, um, I think I have Parkinson's disease or some form of Parkinson's. Now, quite honestly, again, very similar to my cerebral palsy, I really don't know much about it. Right, all I can really tell you is what it does to me and how it affects me, and how I deal with it. But to back up a little bit, I I like going to the bars or going to the restaurants and hanging out with my buddies for college football. And it was going there for a Michigan game, which is where I went to college. So a big university that I like to watch on TV. And I started walking with a cane probably 3 years ago, a walking stick, because I noticed that my parents were in town, or my dad and his wife. My mom had since passed away, but I was hanging, and you said something about this earlier. I'm always hanging on my people, right? Whether it's you or my parents or whatever. And I was hanging out with my parents in the hotel room because there's no reason for them to stay with me.
Sure.
Let them. It's a vacation for them. I live in a 1-bedroom apartment. I kind of like it that way. But I go visit them, and we were hanging out in the hotel room, and I got really annoyed that I was hanging on my father on his arm, taking his wrist the whole time. So I went out on a website and bought a cane, and I've now been using that for 3 years, according to my website receipts. I can tell how long it's been. Well, I went. I guess it was last October for the football game at the restaurant or the bar, and it was a nice new area of Dallas, North Dallas, that had even sidewalks and no cracks and nothing weird. All I had to do was I was parked in a handicapped parking spot. All I had to do was walk the 20 feet from the parking spot to the door. I couldn't get 3 feet from the car without having to go back and turn around. And that was annoying because I realized, like, I've been using that stick for 3 years and it just wasn't working. And I got fed up, and my friends came out and got me and went to watch the game. And they asked me to go out, and I was like, no, I'm going home. I'm like, I'm done.
Were you
But
getting
it was,
tired? Were you afraid of falling, or were you feeling weak?
for me, it's always, I have a sense that I'm going to fall.
Mm-hmm.
I have a sense that I'm going to fall down.
Right.
Or my legs just won't move. They're frozen. Like, so if I don't have something to hang on to, or there's a wide open space, there's no walls and nobody to hang on to, I couldn't walk the 20 feet to the door. So for all those reasons. So I went home and called my doctor, my PCP, on Monday, and said, I need something. I don't know what's wrong with me, but something's wrong, and it's getting worse. So he referred me to an occupational therapist because that's what I asked him for. The occupational therapist, we did a Zoom call or a virtual visit or whatever, and he talked to me for 10 minutes. And he said, Jeremy, have you ever seen a neurologist? So, well, what would I need a neurologist for? So, well, Jeremy, your cerebral palsy, it's not physical. It's in the brain. It's all neurological. And I'm like, no, I've had a podiatrist and I've had surgeries and I've had braces and all those things that I talked about earlier, but no, I've never had a neurologist. So he referred me to a neurology practice here in Dallas, and I went, and 2 months later, you have to, it's a specialist, right? So you got to wait 2 months to get in. So that was November, around Thanksgiving. I then went to see the neurologist in late January earlier this year. He spent an hour with me doing what we're doing here, talking about the medical history and whatever else. And he basically said, yeah, it looks like you have Parkinson's. I said, well, Parkinson's, what do you mean? And I'm like, so like Parkinson's disease, like I see on TV? He said,
The
well,
Michael J. Fox disease. That's what we would
sure.
probably all
That's what
say,
everybody,
right?
Michael J. Fox is the poster child for Parkinson's
Right.
right now. But yeah, that's what I thought. And he said, well, maybe, we're not sure, but if I was to guess, you have Parkinson's, some sort of Parkinson's-like condition. This is where I started to learn about Parkinson's based on what I was told. They've got Parkinson's disease, which is the worst type of Parkinson's that you have. That's what Michael J. Fox has, with the tremors and the shaking and the falling down, the whole 9 yards. I'm sure if you looked it up online, you could watch some videos of him. He's been pretty vocal about his condition. Right. That's Parkinson's disease. Apparently, there's a whole category of conditions, Parkinson's-like conditions, underneath that worst type. And within the hour of him talking to me, he said, yeah, you probably have it. He said people with cerebral palsy tend to get Parkinson's either early, late, or never, right? You just never know. But he said it's a fairly common thing to occur. So he then set me up with the doctor. The doctor then said, okay, here's what we're going to do. We got to diagnose this thing, make sure that it is what you think it is. So he set me up with an MRI, and he set me up with physical therapy, and he set me up with a biopsy. There's apparently a Parkinson's biopsy. Sure. That's done to confirm a diagnosis. And he also did a cognitive test where I sit in front of a computer for an hour and a half and do all sorts of things like color coding and spatial awareness, right, shapes and memory. Right. So I've done all of those things, and I've recently finished all 3 of those exams, and now I'm just sort of waiting for the results. But I've been going to physical therapy twice a week, because that apparently is the only treatment. There really isn't any sort of treatment involved. It's just physical therapy to try to get better or to mitigate symptoms.
Is that helping?
Well, according to my physical therapist, she says it is. We do monthly check-ins, right? She did an initial check-in a month ago, and I just did my first monthly check-in about a week ago. And I said, well, how'd I do? She goes, well, you scored a 33. Well, great. Out of what? Exactly. Well, out of 45, you scored a 33. I'm like, that doesn't sound very good. Right. She goes, well, you're up to 33 from a 27. Okay. Oh, okay. I'm improving. But what am I improving on? Right. She goes, oh, that score of 45 is the fear of falling scale.
Oh, how interesting.
Anything below, this is all stuff I've been told, everything I'm learning from her. She goes, anything below a 45 is a fear of falling, or that you have a tendency to fall. So the whole idea here is to get that score to 45 and above. She told me, we may never be able to fix you, right? But we're trying to get you better. so that she herself as a therapist can say, we're going to release you from twice a week therapy because your scores are getting better. All my scores are up. The fear of falling went from 27 to 33, and all the speed tests that she makes me do, they're faster than they were when I came in a month ago. So according to the stats, it's working, but it's really hard to tell when you're going through it, because it's just, to me, it all feels the same. But so hopefully 1 month in, it seems to be working. The one good thing was I got a walker again. Like I said, I had one when I was 5 years old. Now I have a walker again, and now it really sucks because now I just feel really old, because I go to this neurotherapy where all their clients are elderly, and I'm the youngest kid in the room, and I'm like, oh no, and now I just feel like I'm hunched over in a walker, walking like you see in the cartoons. And I'm like, she goes, well, we're going to do everything we can so you don't, that's not you. She's, you got to march, you got to walk within your walker. Like, I hear her voice in my head all the time when I'm walking. Now when I'm at home, I don't use the walker or the cane, but when I'm out and about now, I use the walker, and I feel more comfortable going wherever I need to go. And I don't need to hang on to my friends when I'm going somewhere, because I can use the walker.
Yeah.
But that in itself brings trials and tribulations, because I had to go through insurance to get all that stuff done. And the doctors don't care about insurance, but insurance is what I do I work in corporate benefits. That's what I do for a living. So I know medical, dental, vision, 401ks, all that sort of thing from my job. And I've been doing it for 20 something years. So I'm working to make sure that my biopsy gets covered as in network, because that biopsy costs $1,800,
Right.
which is a lot of money. And I don't want to just throw it away for a non-network test. So it seems like every time I turn around, I've got another phone call to make, or another doctor to talk to, or I got to call the medical assistant, or I got to call the therapist, or I got to call what I call the handicap store, to say, where's my walker?
And I want people to remember that you're living independently. You're in an apartment, you're on like the third or fourth floor. You drive, you park your car in a parking garage. What are you comfortable telling us about just like everyday life, living independently that way? And I don't know if I've ever seen you driven with you, but do you have pedals? Did you have to install, some sort of kit? Or is that not necessary? Is it just like a normal driving experience?
Oh, no, it's anything but normal. I learned it the hard way. I was 16 years old, and I'm in St. Louis. I'm in the suburbs of St. Louis, and in St. Louis, in Missouri, back then your driver's test was with a state trooper.
Oh,
and I was learning. My right foot doesn't really work because it's the most affected by the cerebral palsy. I can't bring my foot up, and my reflexes aren't good enough. But I tried to learn how to drive with a left-footed pedal, where you connect a dummy pedal on the left to the actual gas pedal on the right.
okay.
Well, as it turns out, and you don't know these things unless you need to use them, so go look it up. But I learned how to drive with a left-footed pedal, and on my driver's test, I barely backed out of the parking spot in the parking lot and backed into a car. and the state trooper looked at me and he goes, Jeremy, you know what you did wrong? I'm like, yeah, I hit a car. And I used words that I shouldn't have used to a state trooper. Yeah, I had an effing car. And he's like, yep, you did. Come back when you learn how to drive.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So after that, we had a friend of a friend of a friend who was paraplegic or in a wheelchair or something. I don't remember, but he drove with a hand control set. He's got a steering wheel knob, and then he's got what is basically a dirt bike handle connected to metal that connects to the backside of the pedal, the gas pedal and the brake. And I learned how to drive on that. Where I can do the gas and the brake with my left hand, down for the gas, forward for the brake. And then I'd steer with one hand with a steering wheel knob.
Wow.
So that's how I drive. And I've been doing it ever since, and everything's fine. And I'm a fairly safe driver, and only had a handful of accidents, just like anybody else would. Um, but when buying a new car is a problem. I can't just drive a car off the lot. I gotta work it out with the dealership and my handicap store that I use to install the handicap. They've got to drive. I got to drive my old car to the handicap store. They've got to drive the new car to the handicap store. We've got to schedule the appointment so they can install the controls, the new ones. It's a big hassle.
Sure.
But it gets done. And at least in the state of Texas, if you have a modified car in the state of Texas, they don't require you to pay sales tax on the motor vehicles. So the $2,000 that you would pay in motor tax is now instead going to pay for the
Sure.
hand controls, which are about $2,000 to $2,500 depending upon where you shop. But quite honestly, it's either pay that money or don't drive.
Yeah, and driving is freedom. So like it's something that you've learned to live with. You got to do it, or
You got to
you're
do it. You got
sacrificing something that you value very much.
Yeah, my kids make fun of me all the time because I don't really because now I work from home, and that's a whole nother story in and of itself. But and you said I live on the third floor, which is great. I like living on the third floor. I don't like the first floor. There's too much foot traffic. And in my particular building, you can drive to the third floor and just park in the handicap spot and walk in the breezeway and go to. It's easy. Um, but even back in college, my parking spot was down in the basement, and back then I'd walk up 3 flights of stairs. We didn't have an elevator, so that I do what needs to be done. As long as there's a railing on the stairwell, I can do anything. But my kids make fun of me all the time because, Dad, you just bought a new car, and this is during COVID. I bought a new car because I need, and it basically sits in the garage because But now I'm going to doctors twice a week, so now it gets driven more often. But like, Dad, your car is so dirty, and you don't drive it. I mean, I've had it 3 years, and I've gone 4,000 miles total because everything where I live is all in the neighborhood, or I get things delivered.
Right. Convenience is key. And you mentioned the walker and experiencing these more severe motor and balance issues. Is it simply a stage of the cerebral palsy, or is it related to these new Parkinson's symptoms?
And this is an educated guess because I'm not a doctor, right? And I barely know enough about my cerebral palsy, and what I do know of my Parkinson's is what I'm being told. But my guess is they're two different things. What people in the medical field will call comorbidities, right? They have two different symptoms. My neurologist said it's really difficult to tell what is your cerebral palsy versus what's your Parkinson's because I don't know where you've been. I don't know what your condition was before. He said, all I know is where you are now. But if I was to guess, yeah, you have both going on at the same time. And it's difficult to discern which one is which. But when I talked to him about it, I said, now I realize, well, when did this start? I'm like, well, I can go back pre-COVID. I could probably 2018, 2017. Now that I know what I'm looking at or what I'm like, that was probably it. I remember 2018, 2017, I had a what I thought was a battle of vertigo where I couldn't walk in the building of my office building without needing help from the lobby to my desk because I couldn't walk. Right. I would get in the building, and because it was so new and neat and there's nothing to hold on to, and the walls are all white tile, right? So there's no depth perception. I just couldn't walk. Or I was walking from the train. I would take the DART train here in Dallas from Park and Ride to the office. I would walk 4 or 5 blocks to the office where I would just what I now know is they call it freezing, where your brain just says, yeah, you can't walk no more. Like I had trouble. Like the good example is I have trouble on occasion walking over the cracks in a sidewalk. Like it's not, there's nothing wrong with it. It's not uneven. It's not, it's not bumpy. It's not broken. It's just, and it's a normal, it's the grout in a sidewalk. It's normal.
But
And
it's appeared.
my
Yeah.
brain says, you can't make that. I'm like, there's nothing for me to step over. And I would just sit there and I would just stand there. And all of a sudden my legs would freeze up and I'd stop. Well, I went to my PC, I went to my family doctor, and he did a test for vitamin D, which was severely low, and that's fairly common. The older you get vitamin D from the sun.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't go outside very often, and even if you do go outside, your body may not absorb it. So he put me on vitamin D pills because we thought that was what was wrong. Well, that wasn't what was wrong because I kept having those issues, and then the walking got worse. So then I got, like I said earlier, I got the cane. But my neurologist said, Jeremy, it's not your balance. Your balance is fine. It's whatever's going on with the Parkinson's is the problem. But now, looking back at it, I can say the freezing I was having many years ago was Parkinson's. The vertigo I was having many years ago, I'm pretty sure it was the beginning of Parkinson's. There was a lot of things, as if I had only known that this was more than just my cerebral palsy or me getting older or a combination of, if I knew it was something different, I would have handled it differently. The only time I went to the doctor for the neurologist was because I got angry and said, whatever I'm doing is not working. I need to fix it. My father used to say, Jeremy, it's all in your head. I mean, my father cares about me just as much as
Right.
anybody else on this planet. But he's known me obviously since I was born. And when I was a kid, he said, Jeremy, pick up your feet. I always hear him, stop dragging your feet, pick up your feet, walk. That's just, that's what he did. He's trying to get me to be normal. And then this thing with the Parkinson's, as it was progressing, I didn't know what it was. My father would say, well, it's Jeremy, it's all in your head. And I would tell him, I said, Dad, I don't think, he goes, it's COVID. You don't go anywhere. Everything gets delivered. You don't go to work anymore. You're working from home. You're not walking every day. You're not doing all the things you need to do. And it's COVID related. But I said, Dad, it's something else.
Right.
I don't know what it is, but there's something I mean, I thought it was mental, meaning that I thought it was psychological, right?
Mm,
I didn't even dawn on me that it was neurological.
right.
And quite honestly, if you had asked me 6 months ago, what's the difference between psychological and neurological, I would have had no clue what the difference is.
Right.
But I knew it was something's going on in my head. It's not working right, but I had no idea what it was.
Wow. It's very eye-opening. It's very eye-opening what you're doing, Jeremy. If someone is watching this and they are living with cerebral palsy, what advice or life hacks would you want to provide them?
Oh, there's a there's a lot. Um, quite honestly, there's not what hacks might work for me, not might not work for somebody else.
Sure.
Um, a story that I can remember when I was in college. Well, the greatest thing is these handicapped parking spots. Let's be real. Even when I was in my teens and I started driving, and I could walk around, I could do whatever I wanted, but I'm disabled by definition. I I am eligible for a handicapped parking spot. I'm going to get one whether I need it or not. So I've been using handicap spots since I was 16, 17 years old. Now I really need them, right? So don't, I would say first and foremost, if you qualify for a handicap spot, go get one, right?
Sooner than later.
Yeah. And the other thing too is, I mean, here's the other thing that would work for everybody is the one thing I tell myself and I tell all my friends. I say, look, I'm stuck with this disability. I mean, talking about my cerebral palsy at this point, I'm stuck with it. I'm the one in 600 kids who has it.
Right.
Well, if I'm stuck with it, I'm going to use it for whatever it's worth. I I got extra time on time exams like the ACT exam for college. I got extra time in on my law school exams. I probably needed it, but at the time I probably didn't. But I could qualify for it, and they're not going to tell a disabled kid no. So use it. So I did. And it helped. And I did it again on the bar exam when I passed. I had that's another good story. But so, you're stuck with this disability. Don't be too proud to take what's afforded.
I like that. Think of the ways that you're shorted, just for the way that you are. So I really like that. And these are not things you and I prepped before this call. So that was very off the cuff. And I think I think that's really good. I think that's pretty powerful. And in perspective, you're already slighted. If you qualify and you can take that little extra help, seek it and get it.
Yeah. I remember, I remember in high school, I was I was top 10% of my class, which back then that's the kind of the differentiation between being smart and being normal, right? So I was top 10% of my class, and I was going to go to Michigan, which is where my brother went before me. And being a Midwestern kid, that was the best public university in the country, probably still is. And it had the hockey program and the football program, all the sports and stuff that I wanted. My high school counselor, who didn't know me that well because I never really went in there very often, he said to me, he goes, Jeremy, you should probably go to a school where you can, a smaller school where you can get the special attention you need. And I know he meant well, but I said, look, dude, if you think I need special attention, you don't know me, because that is the last thing I want. What I did do though, despite what he told me, I went and I applied and I got into Michigan, and I went there for 4 years. But what I did do was, the first thing I did when I went to Michigan was I went to the disability office. Every major university, especially today, has a disability office. And I went in there and I said, whatever I qualify for, I want it. Uh, which at Michigan was free class notes, extra time on exams, and primarily anything that I would qualify for. Everybody was the good thing about those university offices is they generally tailor everything to you personally. So they took my individual education plan, which anybody who's disabled knows what that is. It's generally called an IEP. That's what my mother was fighting for all the way through high school and elementary school. I took my IEP into the college office and said, here's me in a nutshell. Here's my IEP. Based off that, they said, this is what you qualify for, and I used it. So I would definitely do that. The other thing that I did do that I somewhat regret, was Michigan was a huge campus, large school, and I could walk and I can get around. I wouldn't need the walker or the cane. It was very easy for me to walk around 20, 30 years ago. But I took the opportunity to get a handicap room, which allowed me to, instead of being stuck in the freshman dorms way up in the middle of nowhere, they plopped me down in the sophomore dorm in the middle of campus. One problem with that was my roommate had a disability. I didn't even think about it until I got there, that I'd have to room with somebody else like me.
Sure.
And it was the last thing I'd wanted to do. I didn't like I've spent my entire life trying not to be boxed in as a kid with a disability. But I needed to be in the middle of the campus. I did what I had to do. My roommate, as an example, they were they had a football injury in junior high. And so we were 18, 19 years old. So he was going through all the emotional baloney and all the emotional baggage of being a recently disabled person,
Sure.
which is the kind of stuff that I was doing when I was like 5 or 6. He's now doing it when he's 19 or 20.
Yeah.
There would be times he would be going out on dates, dates with random girls from school. And he'd come home and, hey, Jeremy, do you think this girl likes me? And I'm like, I don't know, dude. I have no, like, I don't know, man. I wasn't there. I don't know who she is, but I knew what he was asking. He's like, at least in my head, I was like, do you think she could like somebody like me?
Sure.
is what he was asking. So, but those are the kinds of things that I was dealing with when I was in elementary school. And quite honestly, all the way through high school. I didn't date a whole lot. I don't go up to random girls in bars today. Because I just don't. I think about it all the time. I mean, I may be the I'm the kid that, I'm the kid who's got a one-track mind, and I'm thinking about it all the time.
You're still
Even
a
when I was,
guy.
yeah, absolutely. But I just never dated a lot because I never put myself out there because I was always afraid that people are looking at me.
Well, you
There's
did put yourself out there, like we said. I mean, you've been married, you've had children. So again, I really I'd love to make that a topic for another conversation because I mean,
sure,
we've scratched a very superficial surface on this call. This is all the time that we have for today. It was wonderful. Thank you so
you
much,
bet.
Jeremy. Guys, let us know you've enjoyed this video. We really, like I said, we've only just we've dug out a tiny little corner of this, and if it's helping, if it's helpful, if it's supporting anyone on the other side, please let us know.
I have tons of stories. We haven't even gotten to the good ones yet.
Yeah, so if it's something that you would want to see more of, Jeremy has already said that he would return for another episode. So make sure you provide feedback in the comments. I love you all. I hope to see you soon.